The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
I'm happy to say from the outset that the National Party is not going to support this legislation. That is not to say that we're not sympathetic with what the intent is. It's the fact that this is one of these pieces of legislation that when you look at what was intended and what it will actually do, they very, very much part company. And, sir, this legislation also comes under the category of the old Steve Mahari principle. There'll be a lot of new members here who don't remember Steve Mahari, but he was a Labor minister and he had this wonderful saying that, oh, that's what you say when you're in opposition. That's what you say when you're in opposition. Not what you do when you're in government, but the Mahari's principle was when you're in opposition, you do it. As soon as you get to government, oh, no, well, there's good reasons why we don't. Now, in fact, this legislation is the other way around. This is sort of the Steve Mahari principle in reverse. This is when they were in government, Labor didn't want to do this. When they were in government, when Darian Fenton wanted to do it, ministers on that side, including David Parker, a minister in the Labor government, said, actually, this is a piece of rubbish and we're not going to have anything to do with it. Best thing you do, Darian, is put it up as a private member's bill. And they made her do that and hoping that it would never get drawn from the ballot. Absolutely hoping against all hope it would never get drawn from the ballot. Because if they'd supported it, if they thought there was merit to this, Mr Speaker, if they had thought that, they would have done it as a government bill and they would have put it through. They knew right from the outset that it was rubbish. And David Parker knew that, sir. And now, when they're in opposition, here's the Steve Mahari principle bill. Let's go in and try and make out we're on the side of these people. Let's make out that we think this is a wonderful thing to be doing. And the question that anybody out there should be asking themselves, if they truly think Labor believes in this nonsense, is why the hell weren't you prepared to back it when you were in government? They weren't, they didn't, and they wouldn't. And that's the fact. You can have all the cat calling from the other side you like. They wouldn't do it. Their ministers wouldn't allow it to go through as a government bill. They would not. So, officials have been telling us that this won't work. The risks dramatically outweigh the benefits of doing it, and it wouldn't achieve the goals. And in fact, there are some quite perverse little fishhooks in this legislation that might actually see a contractor, if they were put onto the minimum wage, actually have things that were adverse to their income compared to a worker on the minimum wage who will get all sorts of waiting for regards to their holiday pay and their sick pay and so on. So, we're not prepared to support the bill, sir. As I said before, there's nothing wrong with the intent. But I have to say, I'm one of these members of Parliament, I had to put my hand up, who have got real nervousness about the idea that a minimum wage law will fix things. Because if that was the case, we could get China to implement New Zealand's minimum wage laws in China. And what that would do is have 1.3 billion wealthy Chinese. No, actually it wouldn't. It would have about 99% unemployment in China, because you can't just fix wage levels without the economy actually generating jobs that are real jobs, that are able to pay at that level, etc., etc. And so, sir, when contractors are out there working, and remember this, sometimes contractors are able to deduct a whole lot of expenses that as they're doing their business, they're allowed to, if they're a contractor using equipment or using vehicles, can have a totally different tax regime to a worker who's just being paid a wage and salary. So to try and say, well, we're going to put you on the exact same regime doesn't make sense. David Parker knows that. David Parker will have got that advice when he was a minister in the cabinet. He would have got that advice. His cabinet would have sat around. Yes, he would have. I know he. In fact, if he was asleep at the wheel, that's his problem. But the officials would have been telling his ministers that stuff, sir. And I absolutely agree with the officials' advice on this. This is one of those pieces of legislation that if you just, on the surface of it, say to some people, how about someone who goes out delivering pamphlets, or how about someone who works under a different regime than to a wage, how about they get the same pay as the people who are just waged workers and getting the minimum wage? You know, on the surface of it, most people would say, oh yeah, sounds sensible. But as soon as you, and the devil always in these things is in the detail, as soon as you get into understanding what a contract worker is, and the terms and conditions and their ability to claim certain things that the worker can't, and by the way, the worker earns some things that a contract worker doesn't get. When you're a contract worker, you're not getting sick pay, you're not getting annual leave grossed into your pay and so on. And there's a really good example that officials worked up for us. I'm not going to try and go through it now, but
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. His time has expired.